My name is Dom Douglas, and I am back-to-back XWW Commentator of the Year. With that comes some responsibilities, but also a lot of fun and excitement, and I'm never ashamed to look like a complete fool. Speaking of that, I love playing Magic the Gathering, so much so that I kind of think I play it a little bit too much, and I have some opinions. So now, ExtremeTVOnline.com and XWW Wrestling on YouTube presents my podcast where I talk about Magic the Gathering. It's the Goblin Grenade Podcast. I'm going to try to go through these 6 decks a little quicker. I realized 40 minutes of me talking about 6 Commander decks is not probably cool. Also, thank you for checking us out on YouTube. You can also check out Figure Wrestling Alliance as well. That's what the hat is for, to make it look like this was recorded in a different time, even though it wasn't. Right after the first one. That being said, we're going to go through 6 more of my 24 Commander decks. So by the end of this episode, we will be done half of my Commander decks. And let's kick off things with a little goofy deck. Optimus Prime. From Universes Beyond, Brothers War set booster packs, you could open up Transformers cards. Now, before you lose your mind, at the time, I don't know if Hasbro still... who owns Wizards of the Coast, who makes Magic the Gathering. I don't know if they have the Transformers license anymore, but when the first couple of Universes Beyond card set stuff came out, it was like My Little Pony, and everyone was like, why My Little Pony? Because Hasbro had the rights to My Little Pony at the time. It was very easy to do. Transformers, very easy to do, but I don't know if they have that license anymore. Either way, Optimus Prime. Hero, 3 and Jeskai colors, blue, white, red, or America, for a 4/8 robot creature with more than meets the eye, 2 and America colors, or Jeskai colors, as we'll be calling it for now. At the beginning of each end step, bolster 1, choose a creature with the least toughness among creatures you control, and put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. When Optimus Prime dies, return it to the battlefield converted under its owner's control. If you cast it for more than meets the eye cost, which is less expensive, you get Optimus Prime, Autobot Leader. Living Metal, as long as it's your turn, this vehicle is a creature, so you don't need to crew it. It's a 6/8 trample. Whenever you attack, bolster 2. The chosen creature gains trample until end of turn. When that creature deals combat damage to a player this turn, convert it back to Optimus Prime. Simple. It's a Transformers deck. It's a bolster deck, basically. You could go about it 2 different ways, bolstering, or you can go about it in the way of living artifacts. I went bolstering, so some of the key cards in the deck, obviously Dragon Scale General at the beginning of your end step, bolster X, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control. We're aggro with Optimus Prime. Thundering Raiju, haste, whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then Raiju deals damage, X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of modified creatures we control. So with all the counters swinging willy-nilly, we should be doing a lot of damage to our opponents with Raiju out. Denry Klin, Editor-in-Chief, enters the battlefield with your choice of a +1/+1 counter on it, or a Vigilance counter. Whenever a non-token creature you control enters the battlefield, if Derry has counters on it, put the same number of any kind of those counters on that creature. It's pretty good to double up the tokens. Mech Titan Core. The only reason why Mech Titan Core is in here is to get the living 10/10 Abomination. I'll read it. Exile 5 and tap. Exile Mech Titan Core and 4 other artifact creatures and or vehicles you control. Create Mech Titan, a legendary 10/10 construct artifact creature token with flying, vigilance, trample, lifelink, and it's all colors. When that token leaves the battlefield, return all cards exiled with Mech Titan Core except Mech Titan Core to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control. If you get to pop off that 10/10 crazy card, there's almost no drawback when it leaves the battlefield. So if that 10/10 artifact is exiled or destroyed, you still get the 4 other cards back, except for Mech Titan Core. But they come back to the battlefield. It's insane. It's a stupid good card in a vehicle deck. Urza, Prince of Krug. Artifact creatures we control get +2/+2. Almost everything we're playing here is an artifact because I have a theme here, and it's, Autobots, robots in disguise. And 6, and create a token that's a copy of target artifact we control, except it's a 1/1 soldier creature token in addition to its other types. Thopter Shot. Whenever one or more artifact creatures we control dies, draw a card. This ability only triggers once each turn. 2 and white and tap to make a 1/1 Thopter. Inventor's Fair, probably the best land to put in artifact colorless type of decks. I play this in 2 decks, and you'll see the other one in part 3 or 4. It's Ghalta. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain 1 life. 4, and sack it, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Activate only if you control 3 or more artifacts. Dance of the Manse. Return up to X target artifacts and or non-aura enchantment creature cards with converted cost X or less to the battlefield. If X is 6 or more, they become 4/4 creatures in addition to their other types. Mystic Forge. You can look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an artifact or a colorless non-land card. Mikaeus the Lunarch. Enters with X +1/+1 counters on it. Put a +1/+1 counter on Mikaeus. Remove a +1/+1 counter from Mikaeus to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. Jorah, Weatherlight Captain. Whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. Most of these cards in this deck, historic. We're playing stuff like Goldbug, Jetfire. We're playing a lot of the Transformers that came out in that. We're playing a lot of the Transformers that came out in that subset, like Prowl, Stoic Strategist, and Archie, Sharpshooter, Slicer, CDH All-Star that I'm playing in the main board because I don't play CDH. This is not my jam. I mean, if it's your jam, go for it. Have at it. That's why Commander is great. It does all levels of play. But, the things I want to upgrade in this deck a little bit more is the kind of shockingly lack of Transformers in the deck. There's maybe 8 of them that I have in here. But mainly the deck is a bolster deck. So we want to put the +1/+1 counters on all these various type of creatures that we have. And the Transformers are really hard to get off the board. And that took 9 minutes with intro. So I think we're doing a little bit better this time, Dom. As we get ready for the next deck, it's a precon. But what a precon it is. Also, Card Guard. They're okay. I like these for the price value and whatnot because I need a lot of deck boxes. The other one was a Card Guard as well, but they're not my preferred. If they're there and if they're for good value and I need 5 of them, I will buy them. Card Guard's great. But, they're my least... They're at the bottom for me as I keep knocking into the camera. Be'lakor. Dark Master. This is one of the 2 Warhammer 40k decks I own. When Be'lakor the Dark Master enters the battlefield, you may draw X and lose X, where X is the number of demons you control. Whenever another demon enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. This is not the face commander. This is the backup commander. Each precon does a good job at least giving you an option or two for having a different type of commander. The actual commander in this one, the actual face commander is Abaddon, the Despoiler. It says 5/5 trample. During your turn, spells you cast from your hand with mana value X or less have Cascade, where X is the total amount of life your opponents have lost this turn. I can't wrap my head around that particular type of playstyle. So that's why I went with Be'lakor instead. There's only 4 or 5 demons in the deck, but for how I play, my play style, my play patterns, I think Be'lakor for me is the better commander in this deck. That being said, the Warhammer 40k decks, if you can still find them, get them. They are great. They are phenomenal. Still, probably the second, probably the best Universes Beyond product, commander-wise, that they put out. Lord of the Rings is the grand slam home run of those. But those commander decks were not good. The Warhammer 40k commander decks are brilliant. And I own 2 of them, and I am so glad I do. Some of the cards that are great, once again, Chromatic Lantern, and this time with different artwork. We're playing a 3-color deck, so yeah, let's have some Chromatic Lanterns in there. Kill, maim, burn. Choose 1 or more. Destroy target artifact, destroy target creature, kill, maim, burn, deals 3 damage to target player. We're choosing all. This because of the artwork. Noise Marine. It's got Cascade. So whenever this gets casted, we reveal cards from top of our library until we reveal a spell 4 or less. When Noise Marine enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to the number of spells you've cast this turn to any target. But my man's is rocking a guitar. I know it's within Warhammer lore, and that's why these Warhammer decks were great. They took the utmost respect and care for this franchise. A franchise I almost got into during the pandemic. Thankfully, I didn't, because I don't know if I could afford the figures and the time painting and all that other stuff. But they took a lot of love and care with the artwork, with how they name things. Even the reprints are fundamentally correct. It's a great job. Whereas, the Lord of the Rings Universes Beyond commander decks weren't that good, in my personal opinion. And the Doctor Who had a lot of care and love put into them as well, and they do play patterns that are representative of the Doctor Who's, the various doctors and whatnot, but the crossover between Magic the Gathering and Doctor Who wasn't as significant as Warhammer and Doctor Who. Anyway, let the galaxy burn. X5 in a red for Cascade. It's also got Cascade. Whenever Let the Galaxy burn deals X plus 2 damage to each creature that didn't enter the battlefield this turn. Pump out a bunch of creatures, cast that, and everything else but the stuff that you brought in this turn is dead. Bloodthirster. For a 6/6 flying trample, when Bloodthirster deals combat damage to a player, untap it. After this combat phase, there's an additional combat phase. Bloodthirster can't attack a player unless it's already attacked this turn. Once again, this is one of the 2 or 3 precons that I didn't touch at all. There's been no upgrades made to any of these decks, because that would be perfect for Ishrin, but I didn't. I like to keep a couple precons unupgraded just in case. Blood for the Blood God. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature that died this turn. Discard your hand, then draw 8 cards. Blood for the Blood God deals 8 damage to each opponent. Exile Blood for the Blood God. Skulls for the Skull Throne. This is what I mean about the care and love that they put into this. I mean, Blood for the Blood God is such an awesome card. And then finally, the Great Unclean One, Yurgle. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses 2 life. Then, for each opponent who has less life than you, create a 1/3 black demon creature token named Plaguebearer of Nurgle. In Warhammer lore, Nurgle is the Great Unclean One. And it's like Agent of Chaos or something like that. Either way, all of Nurgle's minions are disfigured and whatnot, and they're just abominations. But Nurgle is probably, and their group, are probably the only truly happy people in the Warhammer universe. Because Nurgle doesn't care. Nurgle just wants you to do you, boo. Basically, Nurgle, just do you, boo.
Editor Dom here. Nurgle is not the Great Unclean One, to clarify, before comments are left. He is the god of decay and rot, but one of the more jovial human beings. One of the more jovial gods in the Warhammer universe, because he celebrates death, because there is life in death and rebirth. That's why they're all happy and whatnot. The Great Unclean One is not Nurgle. It is one of his higher, most ancient plague bearers that carry his most ancient diseases. Nurgle themselves, though, are cool still, and Do You Boo still applies. Back to you, Past Dom.
Now, I wouldn't have gotten into Nurgle. It was actually going to be orcs, because I just love the whole latent psychic abilities, but they're so dumb they don't realize that they have latent psychic abilities. And I know that's like a broad generalization, but like, they drive vehicles that have no way to be driven because there's no fuel or the wheels are broken, yet it still drives. But because they believe. They have the power of belief. It believes. If they paint things red, it goes faster. And because they believe that, it goes faster. But that's just because they have latent psychic abilities. Anyway, enough of my warhammering. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. See, these boxes are actually my favorites. And I wish I had more of them. These are Dragon Shields. You can barely see the logo from Dragon Shield. You can barely see the logo from Dragon Shield. But what these things do is they flip out, and they flip out like that. And I can put something in here. By far, my favorite deck boxes I own. Wilhelm, the Rotcleave. This is my zombie Typal Kindred deck. It's my zombie deck. Whenever another zombie you control dies, if it didn't have decay, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with decay. Basically, the creature can't block, and when it attacks, sacrifice at the end of combat. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a zombie. If you do, draw a card. Wilhelm, basically, I like to get into the loop of sacrificing the 2/2 zombie that we make at the end of the turn, and then getting the decay token, and then, kind of doing that, and then just doing this weird loop where we constantly draw cards, but also we get to do insanely fun stuff like Zombie Apocalypse. Return all zombie creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tap, then destroy all humans. Not the video game, just destroy all humans. Because, it's Zombie Apocalypse. Where's Rick Grimes where you need him? It's also a magic card. Corpse Augur. When Corpse Augur dies, you draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of creature cards in target player's graveyard. Target player, make sure you don't have a bin full of 30 zombies and you choose you, boo, and you draw 30 and lose the game. I don't speak from experience at all. It's great card draw, though. Living Death. Each player exiles all creature cards from their graveyard, then sacrifice all creatures he or she controls, then puts all cards they exiled this way onto the battlefield. Living Death is a fun card to play in a zombie deck, I'll tell you that. Endless Ranks of the Dead. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token where X is half the number of zombies you control rounded down. Gets out of hand really fast if you don't get rid of it. Rooftop Storm. You may pay 0, then rather the mana cost for zombie creatures you cast. Omniscience for zombies. It's an auto include. You need this in your zombie decks. Eternal Sky Lord. When it enters a mass 2, so, we create a 0/0 zombie orc army, and it gets 2 +1/+1 counters on it. But zombie tokens we control have flying. And a couple of cards in here dedicate themselves to buffing the zombie tokens, because we make a lot of them. Once again, in your Typal Kindred decks, if it's blue, Reflections of Littlejohn needs to be in there. Copying zombie spells that are not legendary is crazy. Master of Death enters the battlefield, survey 2. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Master of Death is in your graveyard, you may pay 1 life. If you do, return it to your hand. It's zombie recursion in a weird way, but I like Master of Death in this deck. I don't know why. Because we play a lot of snow lands for this 1 card, 2 cards actually. Blood on the Snow. Choose 1, destroy all creatures, destroy all planeswalkers. Then return a creature or planeswalker card with converted mana cost X or less to the from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of snow mana meant to cast a spell. Every basic land we have is a snow land for this, and Narfi, Betrayer King. Other snow and zombie creatures you control get +1/+1. Okay, 3 snow, return Narfi from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. As long as we have 3 snow lands available to us, we can always bring Narfi back in as long as Narfi's in the graveyard. Necroduality. Whenever a non-token zombie enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Ya boy. And then Living End, because, zombie deck needs a Living End in it. Suspend 3. You pay 2 and 2 black, suspend this. Each upkeep, you remove a suspend counter. When the last suspend counter is removed, you cast it without paying mana cost. Each player exiles all creature cards from their graveyard, then sacrifices all creatures they control. Then puts all cards they exiled this way onto the battlefield. It's kind of like a Living Death variant, but this deck is probably one of my top 5 most powerful decks that I have of the 24. I know which one the most powerful one is. That's Edgar. That's the main event. But this zombie deck, for only having I think 10, 12 cards, and some of those being lands, replaced all the basics with snow covered. So right there we can say it's a heavily modified deck. But if we just take a look at non-land permanents that I've taken out of that deck and replaced, there's only 10 of them. If, maybe 13 max that I've taken out of that deck to put in with the Wilhelm Rockcleaver Precon. But because of the lands, I have to consider that a major upgrade. What do we got next for deck 3? Not that one yet. I don't want to do that one yet. That one's actually probably... Yeah, we'll do it like that. Yeah, this one. All right. Once again, I have 4 of these deck boxes. If you can find these Dragon Shield style Commander deck boxes, get them, man. They're so great. This one is going to be quick. This one is definitely due to be broken up soon. Definitely due to be broken up and parted out. It is Tetsunari Toad Rider, and it stinks because I actually have the old art foil of it, and it's funny, I had the regular base, and then I traded for the alternate art, and then I traded for the anime foil. Because I do like foiling out my commanders, at least. But whenever you cast an enchantment spell, if you don't control a creature named Kimi, create Kimi, a legendary 3/3 black creature flying token with. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, each opponent loses 1 life. You gain 1 life. For 1 and hybrid Dimir mana, black-blue, Tetsunari and target frog you control can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with flying or reach. I took a different route with this. This is a... yeah, this is an enchantment deck. I blanked there. Sorry about that, folks. But it's also a mutate deck. That's the word I was looking for. Mutate. So what I want to do is get Kimi out, mutate the Kimi. Then it's no longer Kimi, but it still has that ability, and then make a new Kimi. So basically, we have Enchanter's Presence. Whenever we cast an enchantment, draw a card. This is the mutate, Trumpeting Gnar. Whenever a creature mutates, create a 3/3 green beast creature token. Okay, so we do that on the Kimi, and then we have the option to make another Kimi. So if we get 3 or 4 mutated Kimis on the board, every enchantment we cast deals 3, 4, 5 damage to each player. Villainous Wealth, because why not? Target opponent exiles the top X cards in their library. You may cast any number of spells with converted mana cost X or less from among them without paying their mana cost. Migratory Greathorn. When this creature mutates, search your library for a basic land card, put it into the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. We want to do a lot of mutating. Dina Soul Sleeper. Whenever you gain a life, each opponent loses 1 life, so it does kind of loop with the Chemies as well. Revenge of Ravens. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, that controller loses 1 life. We gain a life. Shigeki. Return Shigeki. 1 and grant to return Shigeki Jukai Visionary to its owner's hand. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest in your graveyard. For X, and 2 green, to channel it, discard Shigeki. Return X target non-legendary cards from the graveyard to your hand. And then the final card, Spark Double, because we can copy one of the mutated Chemies and get more Chemies. The reason why this deck is up for being broken down is it really hasn't done the thing I've been wanting it to do. I've not won a game with it. I've got to do some cool Chemy things with it. But with what I have, once it gets shut down, there's no coming back from it. Once again, the 4th color. This is blue. Well, the other one was black. This is definitely blue. Just the lighting in here is kind of whack. Going through this faster, which is good. I'm sorry that the other episode was 40-something minutes of me just talking about stuff like this. I'm trying not to do that for all 4 parts of this, because there's still 12 more Commander decks after this. It's Commander deck 11, folks. And it is Lathril, a heavily modified precon. But out of the box was one of the best precons they made. This deck was so powerful out of the box. For 2 black and a green, for a 2/3 Menace Elf, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. Tap 10 tap Lathril and 10 untap elves you control. Each opponent loses 10 life. You gain 10 life. So we want to token double. We want to get as many elves on the field as possible. I don't have a doubling season in this deck. This is where, as I was saying in the other one with Dockside, I was in the process of trying to get stuff like doubling season and parallel lives and damnation and Dockside and a couple of maybe an extremely, maybe even torn up Badland, OG dual land type of things, and just proxying a couple of those cards. Maybe getting a Rhystic Study and having a small binder, which I actually bought, a 4x4 binder just for those cards. So when I say I have it proxied, I do have the card. I just don't want to put it in. I just don't want to buy 5 copies of Doubling Season for $40 a pop so I can put them in 5 of my decks. I'm okay with that because I'm not going to do anything CEDH, which is competitive Commander. Commander's Elder Dragon Highlander. We'll go into the history of that in a podcast. But I just don't feel like having to spend $200 for 5 copies of one card so 5 of my Commander decks get mildly improved. So I was trying to do that. We got a Leyline of Abundance, which is a key card here. Whenever we tap, we can play. If this is in our opening 7, we can play it from our opening 7. Okay, pre-game action, if you will. Whenever you tap a creature for mana, add an additional green mana, and then 6 and 2 green, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. We play so many mana dorks that this is actually okay, even if we do hard cast it. Haunting Voyage. Choose a creature type, elf. Return up to 1 creature of that type from your graveyard to the battlefield. If the spell was foretold, return all creature cards of that type from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. We will always foretell the Voyage, and to do that, during your turn, we may pay 2 and exile this card face down. And then on a later turn, we can cast a Forge Foretell, which is more expensive than hard casting, but getting every single elf back from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped, that is potent. That's a game ender right there. Heroic Intervention, permanent you control, gain hexproof and indestructible till end of turn. Ingrained, that's awesome. Basically, we can't, as long as we have that and the mana up for it, our opponents really can't kill anything and board wipe us or target us or anything. I'm a monster for putting Craterhoof Behemoth in there. This card has actually killed me more times than I've killed people with it when I've lent this deck to other people. And I see them tap 8 mana, and I'm like, we're dead. And the rest of was like, what? I was like, I only have 1 card in that deck that's 8 mana. They're like, what is it? I'm like, what green creature is 8 mana? It's Craterhoof Behemoth. 5/5 with haste. Craterhoof Behemoth enters the battlefield. Creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. We play tokens. We can have, if we have 10 creatures on board and they're 10/1/1s, and we play a Craterhoof, everything gets +10/+10 or +11/+11. And trample. So blocks are bad, no matter what. But that's basically a table-ending game. Shaman of the Pack enters the battlefield. Target opponent loses life equal to the number of elves you control. Interesting way of going around a burn spell, but we'll do it. Elvish Archdruid. Other elves you control get +1/+1. Tap to add green for each elf we control. Green mana for each elf we control. We do. There's a lot of cards in here that have +1/+1 to all elves. Skemfar Avenger, whenever another non-token elf or berserker, mainly elves, we control dies, you draw a card, lose a life. So, we're card drawing here. Casualties of War, one of my favorite cards in Golgari colors. Choose 1 or more, and it's always more. Destroy target artifact, destroy target creature, destroy target enchantment, destroy target land, destroy target planeswalker. In Commander, that's going to hit everything. You're going to almost all the time call for every single one of those abilities to happen. Morrowind the Nurturer. Whenever another elf enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Morrowind the Nurturer. Tap to add an amount of green mana equal to Morrowind's power. As I said, there's a lot of mana dorks which tap to add mana of color and pumping the team. Lais Alana Huntmaster. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you may create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. We are always going to do that. Another Moldavine Reclamation. Whenever a creature we control dies, gain a life, draw a card. We make a lot of creatures and they die all the time. Guardian Project. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under our control, if it doesn't have the same name as something already on the battlefield, draw a card. It's Commander, Singleton. You can only have 1 copy of each card in the deck. So, Guardian Project, stupid good and green. Culling Ritual, my favorite board wipe in Golgari colors. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. That is tokens, that is treasures, that is clues, that is food, that's soul rings, arcane signets, other signets. Yeah, it's really good. Then we get to add a green or a black for each permanent destroyed this turn this way. It's such a back-breaking thing to kill all the table's treasures, and then you wind up getting like 30 mana because of it. And then the last good card is Skemfar Shadowmage. When it enters the battlefield, choose 1. Each opponent loses X life, where X is equal to the greatest number of creatures we control that have a creature type in common. It's all elves, so that's the mode we do. Or if we're in a real big pinch, gain X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures you control of that type. Because we are Golgari elves, most of the time I've casted that card has been to deal X damage. Very rarely do we gain the life. But as I said before, Craterhoof Behemoth is in this deck. I've never won a game with Craterhoof Behemoth, but when I've lent this deck out to other people and friends, they have killed me with Craterhoof Behemoth. And now for the main event of the evening. This deck is kind of sentimental to me. We got the last of the Dragon Shields in the white this time. Alright. It's Chulane, but let me tell the story. These were Brawl decks when Wizards tried to invent a new format and it failed. But it gave rise to Arcane Signet, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you are. Chulane and Korvold, I think. There was 4 Brawl decks. I made Chulane. I pumped it. I over the course of time, I actually was in Vegas, hanging out with a bunch of friends for Rocky Horror, and this was like shortly before I got into wrestling. Like this was shortly before I got into the business, maybe like a month, actually, before I got into the business. And they have this place. I don't know if it still exists. It probably does. It's called Container Park. I'll pull some footage up that I've taken of it. And in this park, in Container Park, which is all containers, like big metal containers, shipping containers. That's it. That's Container Park. But they've built stores and food courts and all this other stuff in this. And there was this Magic store, and I couldn't find Brawl decks for the retail price of $20. They were going for 40, 50, 60, 70 in my area at the time. And I see the Brawl decks. First off, they had them. Second off, they were $20, so I bought a Chulane one. And then over the course of the next year or so, 2 years, I improved the Chulane deck. And it was probably my favorite deck to play. It was my most powerful by leaps and bounds. And then I had to sell it. And it broke my heart. And immediately I found another Chulane Brawl deck, accurately priced, and rebuilt it. So what does Chulane do? Well, it's got Vigilance, and whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. 3 and tap it, return target creature you control to its owner's hand. Sure, it's right there. Some of the key cards in this gets out of hand with tokens and counters and land and a whole bunch of stuff, like Lifecrafter's Bestiary. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may pay green. If you do, draw a card. Another Mystic Remora, because it puts work in. Otarwa, the Soaring City. 3, you can either bring it in for an untapped blue source or channel it. 3 and a blue, discard Otarwa Soaring City, return target artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker to its owner's hand. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. Kind of a get out of the jail free card if they bring in like a Phyrexian Obliterator or a Platinum Angel. Teferi who slows the sunset. This deck does use planeswalkers. There's Teferi Slows Sunset. I will read it because it's got a lot of text for a planeswalker. It's a 4-drop. Choose up to 1 target artifact and 1 target creature and 1 target land. Untap the chosen permanent you control. Tap the target permanent you don't control. You gain 2 life. That was its first +1 ability. -2, look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put 1 of them into your hand and the other on the bottom of your library in any order. And then -7, you get an emblem with untap all permanents you control during each opponent's untap step. You draw a card during each opponent's draw step. Almost never get the ultimate. It's usually the +1. But once again, this deck does deal in counters and, we can definitely proliferate in a different way. Dryad of the Elysian Grove, you may play an additional land on each of your turns. Lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. We're playing 3 color, baby. My favorite pet card, Wilderness Reclamation. The first time this goes on the field, everyone's like, what the hell is this about? And then by the end of the game, they're already on TCG Player ordering play sets of these for their 4 commander decks in green. At the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. Go ahead. I'll tap out every one of my turns. And at the beginning of my end step, I will untap all my lands and hold up counter spells. Civic Guildmage for 1 white. For its green and tap, target creature gets +1, +0, +1 till end of turn. Blue and tap, put target creature you control on top of its owner's library. Protection for our boy Chulane. Protection for our boy Chulane. Protection for all the other things on the field as well. We can bounce it back to our hand. And it's kind of like a backup Chulane in this aspect that it does its second ability. Another Guardian Project, because what would a commander deck in green be without Guardian Project? Smothering Tithe. I had a playset of these before they blew up. I had a playset of Smothering Tithes before they blew up. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you create a colorless treasure artifact token with, sack this to add 1 mana of any color. I had a playset of those. And then the Game Nights episode dropped where it was played and its power was shown, and then it blew up, and it's been that way ever since. I only have 3 of them now. 3 of those versions, because I sold the others, I think. Oh, I sold the other one that was in the original Chulane deck I had. And then I opened up the anime one in, I forgot what, but, where it's a very expensive card now. Cure, Behemoth Beckoner. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This might as well be just an enchantment because of that static ability. It's, untap target permanent does put some work in. I will say that. Eerie Interlude, Teferi's Protection on a budget. Exile any number of target creatures you control. Return those creatures to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. I'm going to play a board wipe. Okay, I'm going to bounce all my creatures. They just go into exile and they'll come back, and then I get all the ETB triggers, enter the battlefield. Once again, Semester's End, another version of Teferi's Protection on a budget. But this one does Planeswalkers, and at the beginning of the next end step, return them all to the battlefield under its owner's control. Each of them enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it, or an additional loyalty counter on it if it's a Planeswalker. Boseiju, just a stupid dummy good card. Discard Boseiju, and your vehicle doesn't need to be that loud. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land, and an opponent controls, and they may look for their library for a basic land. And then, beautiful art, Time Wipe. Return a creature you control to its owner's hand to destroy all their creatures. This deck has so many play patterns because we put so many counters on there. And when we start cooking, boy, do we start cooking. We start drawing cards. We start drawing cards. We start putting +1/+1 counters on things. We start adding getting additional land drops and just going ham. And our opponents are like, do we got a turn? I'm like, yeah, chill. I still got to draw 3 more cards and put 2 more lands in the battlefield. And then I'm going to attack. And then I'm going to bounce things and do it again. At the original version of this deck was way more powerful, way more potent. But, sometimes bills come in and they're a bitch, and you have to pay them. So I did by selling my Chulane deck and then immediately rebuilding it. It's nowhere near as good as it once was. The mana base was actually way better before. Now mana basing it on a budget. Heck, I even had a Mana Confluence in the original. But so far, 6 more decks of my Commander decks. Half of them are done now, and we've got 12 more Commander decks to go. Once again, I want to thank you for watching on YouTube, on XWW Wrestling. If you want to see our awesome XWW action, go to ExtremeTVOnline.com, $4.99 a month. First 5 days are free to catch all the amazing XWW wrestling action that we provide. And on the YouTube, thank you as well. You can check out Figure Wrestling Alliance. You're checking out my stupid podcast right now, and plenty of other stuff that we do on the YouTubes as well. My name's Dom Douglas, back-to-back, Commentator of the Year, and may your top deck always be mythic.